Well, I guess who's going to speak first today? We should have probably gone through some of this. Good morning, Lisa. How are you? Welcome to Tennis Takeaways with Lisa and Dewey. I am Dewey Evans, a performance architect with LearningZone.Academy and tennis coach at the Austin Tennis Academy here in Austin, Texas.
And I'm Lisa Stone, creator of Parenting Aces, a website, podcast, social media platform for parents of junior tennis players and college tennis players. And I'm thrilled to be here with you, Dewey, once again. Welcome, everybody. And we hope you enjoyed this week's conversation. And we hope you will leave us some comments wherever you happen to be watching today.
Yeah, Lisa, we've just gone back to the future again. So events are starting to be canceled again. They've knocked out the boys and girls national hard courts for the 16s and 18s, which were going to happen. And so we're at that place of no national significant, the highest level of national competition for U.S. juniors. I think there's an opportunity now for people to get to work and to make some changes in their game. I don't know if you have any quick thoughts on that.
Well, also, we're seeing some sections start to cancel their higher level events as well, the ones that require extensive travel to get to. So I know Southern Section made an announcement yesterday that it's canceling its higher level events and actually recategorizing some of its events in hopes that people are going to stay and play locally as opposed to traveling to these junior tournaments.
Looks like things are going to be changing. We'll keep bringing it to you, as it happens, week by week. Every day something new. We have a guest this week, Lisa. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, we've got Isu Ma'at with us, and Isu is the former head of USTA's Diversity and Inclusion program. He now has a fresh, as he calls it, program called Quantum Power Skills, where he is doing consulting around diversity and inclusion. And for those of you who have been watching the last few weeks, we've been having these conversations about what is tennis's role in this whole notion of diversity and inclusion. What does tennis do well? What has it not been doing so well? And what can we do better? And so we thought having Isu on the show would be a great opportunity to pick somebody's brain that is working exclusively in this space and hear his thoughts. So Isu, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. And I had watched you in a UTR webinar that you did a few weeks ago. That was my introduction to you. And so we're just so thrilled that you are here with us today and sharing your expertise.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good morning, everybody. I'm ready to go.
Good. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? Because you've certainly been involved in some of the significant programs that are addressing bringing tennis to a multicultural community, and the one that I really thinking of is the Harlem Junior Tennis Program. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience there and then how it's helped you move forward to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah, I like to tell people I learned tennis. I started learning tennis at what we call UCLA, University on the corner of Lenox Avenue. That's a different UCLA, Lisa. Sorry. than the university that's close to you. But growing up like a lot of kids, it was a very communal kind of atmosphere. Obviously, the most prominent player from the program during that time and in general, probably James and Thomas Blake, and their father was one of the coaches at the program. But it was what we learned there was the value of hard work more than anything else. We certainly all competed, and we were very competitive, and we all went off to do our own thing. But it was a tremendous.
We just lost you, Isu.
Hopefully he'll come back in, and it's back to us. And
no.
It sounded like it was going to be a very, very interesting. Hopefully he will log out and log back in. I have no idea what just happened with his connection, but welcome to the live broadcast.
Yeah.
While we wait for him to come back, Lisa, let's talk a little bit about what you're hearing from the sections, because I think that's more relevant, right? Only a very few number of kids are ever going to be out playing. And then at the college level, because I know that there's a lot of talk of all sports are
Yeah.
going to be at the collegiate level going to be spring only. So that,
Yeah.
looks like football might move to spring, and what happens to programs if football doesn't happen. So what are you hearing? Ah,
Well, a couple things I'm hearing are that, well, obviously the sections have been left to make decisions on their own on behalf of their own section in regards to junior competition. So every section is coming up with a different game plan. Southern section, because of the size and the scope of the section and the fact that it encompasses 9 states, and for the kids living on the perimeter of the section, it requires a lot of travel and oftentimes hotel stays and all of that. I think that was the impetus behind Southern's announcement yesterday. Other sections are doing different things. Most of them are trying to keep play local, which I think is a great idea. In terms of college, are seeing announcements come out from the NCAA and from the athletic directors on a regular basis. So, as I've been doing all along, I want to encourage those who are concerned about college tennis to make sure that you are following the NCAA and the athletic directors online so that you're up to speed on what's happening in college tennis and the rules as they change, the program cancellations, the transfer information, scholarship information, all of that.
yeah.
And
And I think
Twitter
a
has
lot of
been
that,
great
Lisa,
for
is on, I believe, is on your Parenting Aces Facebook page, so people can kind of go there
it
and
is.
find your way to where all the great information is. We do have Isu back with us, and I want to
Oh,
bring him back on. So
okay, great.
welcome, Isu. I'm not sure exactly what happened,
Sorry about
but
that. Yes,
technology.
technical
Tech,
difficulties. Yes, I
Yeah.
apologize. So just was wrapping up the conversation about, growing up playing tennis in Harlem, playing with some, pretty tough competition. Mentioning, James and Thomas Blake, for example, and just the value of hard work, but also the people that we met there, Dewey, to kind of lead into where you were headed. The people that we met there from all walks of life, the value of having that kind of diversity around you at all times, and how that inspires you as a child, especially as a teenager, and how that stays with you for the rest of your life.
How did that inform your decision to really get into the work of increasing diversity and inclusion in the sport?
Great question, Lisa. Thank you. Sometimes I like to say that sometimes diversity chooses you, and other times you choose it. For me, diversity chose me. I started in the USTA as a tennis service representative, but I was the TSR for New York City. So by virtue of being in one of the largest, cities in America, and the diversity that's organic in that particular city, I developed a certain lens, a certain understanding of where our programs and services fit, and how they fit in certain communities. As fate would have it, my boss at the time was in charge of diversity, left the organization, and the leadership then approached me about filling those shoes, and the rest is history.
What do you feel like tennis is doing well on that front?
I like to start with the U.S. Open, arguably the largest revenue producing sporting event in the world on an annual basis. And yet, my colleagues around the sports industry are envious when I say that it is also, in my opinion, the Mount Rushmore of diversity in sport. When you consider the fact that the championships are held at the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center, the marquee courts are Arthur Ashe Stadium and Louis Armstrong Stadium. Adjacent to those buildings is a larger than life size statue of Althea Gibson. And oh, by the way, there's been equal pay since 1979. So there's a lot in that that we're doing right. I, I, the fan data for the U.S. Open also suggests that that people of color over-index in terms of attending the U.S. Open and attending specific matches. So there's tremendous interest in the sport of tennis. And then I think that with Katrina Adams being the president for 2 terms, D.A. Abrams, formerly the chief diversity officer, Martin Blackman, the head of player development, I think that sends a message that diversity is important to the USTA, and hopefully that message is hitting home around the country.
That's interesting, because I would suspect there would be those that would take issue to some of those comments, but I do believe that there has been significant progress made from the days way back when I was involved with the USTA and felt like almost I had to leave the USTA in the mid-90s and move towards doing things with the ATA because the USTA in some parts of the country was not accepting. And I wonder how much, New York being a, fairly liberal part of the country, me being from Massachusetts, it also being a fairly liberal part of the country, how tennis looks different there than it does in some other places, in Texas, Georgia, Florida, where things are more conservative. What have you found in terms of the programming and how things are viewed in different places throughout the country?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff there. You're kind of getting in my sweet spot, getting me fired up here, Dewey. But I would say first and foremost, you take 1917, and you guys had Bob Davis on last week, and I'm sure he went through the timeline. But you take 1917, you have the first ATA national championships. You have 3 champions, a men's singles champion, a women's singles champion, and a men's doubles championship. 100 years later, in 2017, you have Katrina Adams as the president of the USTA. Martin Blackman is the head of player development. Serena Williams, a pregnant Serena Williams, wins the Australian Open. Bria Minor becomes the first African-American female to win the NCAA championships. That year at the U.S. Open, you have 3 African-American women in the semifinals of the U.S. Open, 2 in the finals, and then obviously Sloane winning the U.S. Open. That also means that you had 3 black coaches for the first time in the semifinals, and really Kamal Murray, as outside of Richard Williams, the first black coach in the Open era to win, to have a Grand Slam champion. So that's a lot about where the USTA was, where the ATA was, and how much progress has happened. But to your point around the country, look, there's 17 diversity and inclusion leaders in the 17 sections around the country. I'm very familiar with all of them and friendly with all of them, and I know the hard work that they put into trying to diversify the sport, not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's also a business imperative, right? I mean, if we look at the fastest growing communities around the country, it'll be impossible to grow the sport, something that you hear a lot in USTA circles. Impossible to grow the sport if we don't do a better job of connecting in diverse communities.
Okay, so I'm going to push back. Let me just push back for a second, Lisa, because I want to say that a lot of those things that you're talking about, successes, so the Sloane Stephens, the Kamal Murrays, all of that, would have happened with segregation as long as people were allowed to play. So we're talking about black coaches working with black players. I spent a lot of time around juniors that are now in that coaching ranks and hitting partner ranks. So Jermaine and Jameer Jenkins and Robbie Poole and that whole, who are they working with, right? So that they're not coaching players other than black players, or, in Jermaine's case, Naomi Osaka is, mixed and half black. So is there really progress that's been made where everything is open to everyone? Yes, things have been made open all the way to the very top, the same way Barack Obama managed to be president of the United States. But did making it to the pinnacle? Was that maybe letting somebody in to be able to say that we're having actual diversity, and then once that person leaves, that the door is actually being closed to those who come behind, or there is going to be a long period? You know, I saw Malavia Washington said something recently of he can't believe how long it's been since there's been an African American male in the finals of a Grand Slam. And so did we truly make that kind of progress, or did some people breaking through make us complacent and feel like we didn't have any more work to do?
Yeah, Dewey, I love this. Listen, I'm going to push back and I'm going to tell you that my children don't have the baggage that I have, right? So to them, they only know two presidents. For them, they only know two presidents of the USTA. For them, watching Sloane and Venus and Madison Keys in the semifinals of that U.S. Open, watching Osaka play Coco Golf last year, and they invited their friends over. For them, it looks like this is a different sport than it does for us who came up in an era where it was much more difficult to see images of people playing, competing, winning at the highest level that look like us. So as I think about the diversity in this sport, I tend to have a futuristic point of view as opposed to looking backwards in terms of the historical point of view. Although it's relevant and valid, we're all part of this continuum, and hopefully we're passing the baton to the next generation, and there's less baggage each time. So for them, they look at it very, very differently, and it's their time, not my time. So I'm enjoying the fact that they can be inspired by images of themselves competing that I didn't have when I grew up. That's what I would say, number one. To Malvia's point, I mean, I would have to agree, but if I had a son, and I don't, and you know, this is going to ruffle some feathers, so close your ears when I say this, but if I had a son, he wouldn't play tennis, right? The value proposition for boys in tennis is just not there. You can suck in baseball. Sorry, my friends at MLB. You can suck at baseball and make a living at baseball. You can suck at basketball and football and make a living in basketball and football. You cannot suck in tennis and make a living. In fact, you can be great in men's tennis, relatively speaking, and be struggling to make a living. So to me, the value for scholarships at the D1 level, like to me, the value proposition on the men's side is not there, and it's going to take a lot more work to create a better value proposition for men's tennis. Doesn't matter whether you're African American or otherwise. But for women, the WTA Tour is literally the only self-sustaining professional women's tour in the world. LG, what is it? PA
LPGA.
Is connected to the LPGA. Sorry, is connected to the PGA, and you'd be hard pressed to find me another professional women's sport that actually is in the black. So the WTA is very successful, wildly successful. Women in tennis and golf make the most money, and there's 8 full scholarships at the Division I level. So I could understand his point. I think it's going to take a lot more time and effort to create a better value proposition for boys in tennis. The kid who won Fortnite, by the way, you guys will love this. The kid who won Fortnite at the National Tennis Center last year won $4 million. Nadal only got $3 million for winning the Grand Slam tournament.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, keep your son playing Fortnite.
By far the best guest we've had, Lisa, right there. That's right. The best comment we've had out of a guest so far. Love it. Yeah. Love it.
You know, just being honest.
So what do we need to do, Isu, to make it better for boys to choose tennis and for families of boys to choose tennis? And what's being done to further that mission?
Yeah, there's a lot of outreach. But like I said, I mean, you know, it's just a hard sell. One of the things I will say is this. You would be amazed how many professional athletes, especially those from other countries, how many of them actually play tennis. Tennis is the 4th popular sport in the world. So people love tennis. We have to build on that first and foremost. Multi-sport athletes, again, in tennis, this is a little taboo. I have lots of friends who are high performance tennis coaches, and they're spending this developmental stage where kids are between the ages of 12 and 18, and they're focused on laying that technical and tactical foundation. They're focused on putting in their kids getting those 10,000 hours in and getting that match experience that they need to have a chance to make it at the college level or even higher. And so it's very hard in tennis, where there's really no off season, it's very hard to find time to be a multi-sport athlete. And yet I would argue, to get more boys inspired to play tennis, there really needs to be opportunities for them to use those transferable athletic skills on and off the court from a cross training standpoint. The last thing I'm going to say is this, and Dewey, I think you'll like this, but if we are going to be successful going into diverse communities and asking them to play tennis with us, we have to be clear that we're asking them to play tennis on their terms, not play tennis on our terms. So let me give you a good example. My colleagues and I took a big group of kids from Perth Amboy, New Jersey, which is over 80% Latino community. We took them to New York City, to the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center, to watch the New York Empire compete in World Team Tennis. The announcer says, and next up to play for the New York Empire is Marty Fish. Now, I don't know what about Marty Fish inspired these kids to jump up, but they jumped up and they started screaming, El Pescador! And immediately our staff, their staff, they look at the kids and they go, shh, 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 shh. And I said, no, don't shush them. Because if we want them to fall in love with this sport, they're going to have to do it on their terms. That night, the head of their program sent me a picture that one of the moms sent them. Little kid sleeping with a headband on, a wristband on, and a racket underneath him. I guess he was 8 or 9 years old. And then the caption wrote, the next Marty Fish. Like, he got inspired that day. And those things are important.
So is
I
that
just got
maybe...
goosebumps.
Yeah. So isn't that the issue, right? Tennis is boring. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was one out of a tennis academy in Spain. They're doing something to control the controllables. And, they were talking to Noah Rubin, and Noah was saying that tennis is just boring. That, he's a high-level tennis player, won junior Wimbledon, and he's like... Dude, the sport's boring. I can't watch it. I'll watch the first set, and then I'll turn it off and hope that it gets to a fifth set, and maybe I'll watch it. That there's just how are we going to bring young people in and hold their attention when we're talking about a sport that's just boring? And so that's kind of what you're talking about, is that you get people riled up, and then you're like, oh, sit on your hands, be quiet. And
that's right.
What does that do to a young person? Basketball used to be boring too, right? So when I was a kid, there was a time when players couldn't dunk. So you watch Wilt Chamberlain doing these finger roll things because he couldn't dunk a basketball. And so what did people want to watch? Every single kid wanted to watch the Harlem Globetrotters because that was the NBA before the NBA. And so people were talking about being, Curly Neal or Marcus Haynes or Meadowlark Lemon. That's what the kids on the playground were doing. And then there was this time when everybody was talking about, college basketball and then the pros, all the fundamentals were gone and they weren't working on it. It was playground basketball was now coming into the major leagues. And guess what? The leagues blew up. All of a sudden there was money, the contract, people wanted to watch. And maybe that's what's missing when people talk about, Nick Kyrgios doing things and that was just crazy. Well, maybe it was more important for him to have people want to watch than to actually be the winner of the tournament. And is that the most important thing?
I couldn't agree more. Love Roger Federer, but Roger's boring. Rather watch Novak. Rather watch Gael Monfils. Rather watch Nick Kyrgios. Rather watch Dustin Brown. Right? Like the swag factor on the men's side has to improve. Is that a word? Swag factor, maybe in the Urban Dictionary.
For sure.
But the swag factor on the men's side I think Noah is right. Listen, this is not new, by the way. John McEnroe was famous for saying, I'm much more of a fan of basketball than I am at tennis, than I am of tennis, but I'm a better tennis player than basketball player, right? So this is not anything new. But again, for this sport to grow and for this value proposition to improve on the men's side, I think it does have to get a little less boring. And you're seeing this not just in tennis, but you're seeing it in golf and some other sports as well. Your example was a great example in basketball. And yeah, I mean, it will take some work, but you do see. Look, here's some of the things here's some of the evidence that when you realize things are changing. Francis Tiafoe started that video last month after the death of George Floyd. Like if tennis athletes are moving into this social justice space like other athletes, that is very, very different, right? I mean, save for Arthur Ashe and Billie Jean King, right? But if this new crop, this new generation, generation X, generation Y and Z, we know that they're not going to be silent. So if this also spills over into tennis, that will change things. You mentioned Nick Kyrgios. The bottom line is, if you ask kids who they want to watch Nick Kyrgios. They even want to watch Taylor Townsend, by the way. Taylor Townsend, hugely popular with kids, much more so than she is the pure kind of avid tennis fan, if you will, or even more importantly, corporate America. I think when she reached the semifinals last year, I mean, none of her clothes had a logo on it. I mean, to me, if you were corporate America, you were embarrassed. Here, this child is making it to the semifinals of the U.S. Open. She's beat the number one player in the world and doesn't have a single company representing her. That's a shame, because you ask kids about Taylor Townsend and they go crazy. They would love to hang out with Taylor Townsend for a day. So, yeah, I think that these are some of the things that the sport
So if
at the
things
highest
progress,
level, leadership has to think about.
Have things progressed? And Lisa, I want you to jump in, but like you just like said the story of Xena. So Xena, 3 in the world without a sponsor. So how have things changed from my generation to where they are today?
Well, one thing that's changed is Serena Williams and Venus Williams. We can now add to that Sloane Stephens and Naomi Osaka. I mean, like I said earlier, I just didn't have all these role models to look up to, champions to look up to. There's more now, and hopefully there will continue to be more. That's what I would say, Lisa. I'm not sure about you.
Well, I mean, part of the issue, I think, is getting corporate America to recognize the value in backing these athletes. And for whatever reason, corporate America is happy to back athletes of color in other sports, but in tennis, they're missing the boat. And I don't know why that is. What story are we not telling effectively to engage corporate America in our sport and for our sports athletes, regardless of the color of their skin or their background? And somehow there's a disconnect. And I think that's what Dewey and I are trying to work through via this show and these conversations, is connecting the dots.
Let me give you a good example, and this is not to take shots at anybody. I love, I'm a diehard tennis fan. You name the person, I watched them. I tried to emulate them on some level, and I looked up to them, and I respect them, right? But last year, and I spoke to my colleague at ESPN about this, my colleague in the D&I space at ESPN about this. Last year, one of the biggest matches on ESPN, and ESPN has the rights for the U.S. Open, one of the biggest matches was Coco Gauff against Naomi Osaka. My 14-year-old daughter invited her friends who know that she plays tennis, but they don't know much about tennis. But she said, you guys got to come and you got to watch this match. Match is going to be epic, right? And so they come over to my house. They got food and sodas and pizza, and they're ready to watch this match. And delivering the match on that day, Lisa, Chris Fowler, I believe Chris Fowler is more of a college football guy than a tennis guy, right? Chris Fowler, Chris McKendry, Chris Evert, Pam Shriver, Patrick McEnroe, John McEnroe, right? And so I said to my colleague, I said, you guys are killing me. We're boots on the ground trying to convince people that the sport has changed and that it isn't this middle-aged, all-white sport that a lot of people think it is. And yet, the day that my daughter and her friends turned on ESPN to watch this big, big match with two girls that look like them, the people who brought that match to them were middle-aged, all-white folks. And so we still have mixed messages that we're sending. And that can happen. Kay Nishikori played 2 nights before. ESPN has a boatload of talent in the organization. There's not one Asian person you can have on the broadcast on the night when Kay Nishikori is playing. And oh, by the way, the Asian community, I mean, almost doubly over indexes in the sport of tennis. I mean, that's just a miss, as you were saying, from corporate America not understanding our game. And that's also a miss on our part from a leadership standpoint of not being out front communicating what the values are that are important to us as we move forward and try to grow the game.
I hear you. We're going to run out of time, but I want to give you a chance to tell us about your new initiative. What's going on with you at this point in time?
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. Yes, Quantum Power Skills. You can find us on the web, quantumpowerskills.com. We are a transformative boutique diversity inclusion organization that really takes a forward-looking approach in terms of what the business case for diversity and inclusion is, and therefore what the solutions are in terms of diversity and inclusion. So we're very excited. We think that we kind of distinguish ourselves in some pretty interesting ways. We really are immersive from a diversity standpoint. We go very much beneath the surface in terms of fostering inclusion and talking about what that looks like and putting processes in place to drive that. We focus on equity, again, a multi-dimensional approach to advancing equity. And then last but not least, leveraging diversity and inclusion for business as a catalyst to innovation as well. So very, very exciting and cool projects that we're looking at and working on. And hopefully some of this stuff will find its way back into tennis.
Great job. I love that, Isu. I can't wait to get online and dig deeper into your website and the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And certainly
Thank
if there's
you.
anything that Duey and I can do through our various platforms, whether it's Tennis 2020 on Duey's end or Parenting Aces on my end, I hope you'll reach out to us because we're here for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I definitely will.
Yeah, or even just helping with any of the media end of it, because our company is largely a media company at this point in time, as much as it's a tennis company.
Great.
Well,
thanks, David.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been informative and it's been fun, above and beyond anything else. I encourage anyone who has watched this to reach out to Isu. He brings this kind of energy to everything that he does. When he says, "You're getting me riled up," I don't think it takes much to get him riled up.
Good point. It's a very good point, Dewey.
Yeah, Isu, thanks so much. And
my
Dewey
pleasure.
and I
Thank you.
we're looking forward to continuing these conversations, though we're going to take a leap back into junior tennis, I think, with our next show and talk a little bit about what's happening on the junior comp side. We touched on it shortly while you were offline, Isu, but we want to get back in and talk about what's happening and what families need to be doing to keep their kids interested and involved and growing in the sport. So if anyone wants to reach out to us with show ideas, guest ideas, or just comments on what you've seen here, you can reach me, Lisa at parentingaces.com. You can reach Dewey at deweyevans@gmail.com. Easy peasy, and you can always leave comments on whatever outlet you're watching this on. We're here for you. Dewey, have a great week. As always, it's been fun, and we'll see everybody next week.